Jeff Larson is the author of Digital Marketing Essentials. He is an associate professor of marketing in the Marriott School of Business at BYU. He has been teaching digital marketing since 2009. His research has been published in the Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Consumer Psychology, and other top research outlets, and has been featured in New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, NPR, Good Morning America, and CBS This Morning, among other national press outlets. That's pretty impressive. And he also has 5 children, and because of those 5 children, he has no hobbies. So, Jeff, thank you for being here today, and we're excited to hear your presentation on data to action using web analytics to drive results. So go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really enjoyed speaking to the StuKent crowd. That became really evident this summer how great the StuKent crowd is when I presented at the ProfCon. The questions I got were the most informed and most carefully thought out questions I've probably ever received from a presentation. So thanks for being here. So I'll be talking about both Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. I'm not pitting them against each other. I'm just going to try to give you the strengths of both platforms with the goal of giving you a deeper understanding of both, of just web analytics generally. So my hope is that by the end of this talk, you'll have some good ideas about how to teach web analytics to your students. But you're not going to get those ideas about how to teach web analytics directly from me telling you this is how you should teach web analytics. What I'm going to focus on is giving you as much information about those analytics platforms as possible so that you deepen that understanding, and then those ideas about how to teach it should come just from that understanding. So when I teach web analytics, I typically log on directly to my Google Analytics account. I show them the analytics property for the demo account. And I have my students log into that same demo account, and we do a lot of exercises together. For this talk, because of the Demio software, it's not really amenable to this live interactive showing of Universal Analytics and Analytics 4. So I'm just going to be showing you a bunch of different screenshots from the Google Merchandise Store analytics package on those 2 analytics packages. So, as you know, Dee already mentioned, the Google Merchandise Store is a website that is managed by Google that sells Google branded clothing and accessories, hats, jackets, backpacks, and so on. And so the traffic and purchases that occur on that website are tracked by both UA and GA4. That's going to be what my shorthand for Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4. Google Analytics 4, of course, being the newer analytics package. And that data is made available to anyone. Most of you have probably already logged in and checked out those demo accounts. So, for those of you who do not actually, who have not been on there, I just did a search for Google demo account, and I clicked on the first link, and I got to this page. And if you see those links at the bottom there, those links show you that'll let you access those accounts in Google Analytics. So once you click on one of those, you log in with just your regular Google account, and when you go into analytics.google.com, you can access those. Here you can see the demo account. I can click on GA4 for my Google account. You can also access Universal Analytics, but when you access Universal Analytics, you'll notice that you actually have to select which view of the account you want to take a look at. So I recommend look at the master view. The master view has a bunch of data filtered out. If you look at the raw data view, you're going to have a bunch of garbage data in there, including data from bots and crawlers. You're going to have data from spam. There's this weird analytics spam data that can be on the profile. So the master view has filtered all of that out. One big difference between Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics is that Universal Analytics, when you apply a filter to filter out certain data you consider not worth looking at, it creates another view that you can look at. In Google Analytics 4, when you apply a filter, it just deletes that data and you never get to see it. And so the Google Analytics 4 simplifies things in that you just have the one view you can look at. That's just one fundamental difference between those two. All right, before we go any further into this discussion, I want to talk about web analytics generally. So the purpose of analytics, both web analytics and just general analytics, is of course to give you insights into your customers. But of course, not all insights are created equal. We specifically want insights that can be made to use to make better decisions to improve our profitability. And in web analytics, the data is supposed to give us insights into our customers and potential customers' behavior on our website, right? So if we can understand our customers' website behavior, we might be able to figure out some things we can do on the website to improve our profit. So first and foremost, we want to use our web analytics data to learn about how to improve conversion. For a retail website, that means getting more purchases. For a lead generation website, that means getting more leads. Whatever our website is, the most reliable way to improve our profitability is to improve conversion. But of course, that's not the only way. If we can get our customers to spend more money when they buy from us, that will also improve profitability. And that's different than improving conversion. For a retail website, that means directing our customers to either high margin products. It might mean recommending complementary products during checkout so they buy more from us. Or it might be offering product bundles. For a lead generation website, that might mean focusing on higher value customers. So that's another way, is that's increasing our purchase amount. Another way web analytics can be used to improve profitability is to determine which channels are bringing us the best traffic. And if you're familiar with Digital Marketing Essentials, that's the textbook I wrote with the Stukin founder, Stu Draper, you'll notice that this is basically the website framework I lay out in chapter 1 of the textbook. A successful website needs traffic, conversion, and a good revenue per conversion. So web analytics can and should be used to examine those 3 fundamental dimensions of website success to improve your profitability. Now, 3 more specific capabilities of analytics. Analytics can be used to track performance on an A/B test. So if you're going to test different versions of a key landing page, which of course you absolutely should be doing, analytics is where that data is tracked to determine which version of the landing page is better. Another use of analytics, and one that is sometimes overlooked, is to identify technical problems on the website. If Chrome gets an update and suddenly one of the forms on your website no longer works on Chrome, analytics will make that obvious if you know where to look. Finally, we can also use analytics to examine our checkout procedure to ensure we aren't losing a large portion of our purchase-ready customers, our most profitable customer base, because of some purchase friction in our checkout process. Now, that capability of analytics is referring specifically to the conversion funnel, which, 10, 15 years ago in the early days of web analytics, that was like the most profitable, the best thing to look at in analytics to improve your profitability. But nowadays, most web platforms have really ironed out those kinks, and so those purchase procedures are usually really smooth, but it's still worth mentioning. So. Of course, it probably goes without saying that this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to run through some of the big hitters, some of the main purposes of analytics and ways you can improve profitability through analytics. So, okay, so I want to keep these desirable, actionable insights in mind while I'm going to show you some screenshots of the home screen in Google Analytics 4 for that demo account, the Google Merchandise Store. So the first 4 statistics we see are the number of users that have been to the website, the number of those users who were new or coming to the website for the first time as far as Analytics 4 is able to track, the average amount of time the user was engaged with the website, and then finally the total revenue raised. And clearly there's a reason Google chooses to show these 4 statistics. We've got traffic/user information about how engaged users are, which is a good indication of how well they're working down the funnel, how active they are, and then finally this bottom line financial information. Okay, next to that we have some real-time information about what's happening right now on the website. Only because this is a screenshot, this is more likely this is was happening on Monday at the time I was preparing these slides. To the right of that, there's an insights box, which are just showing some automated discrepancies from the norm that Google's Insights engine has generated, and they're using machine learning algorithms. So already right there, even though I'm not in my talk going to talk anything about artificial intelligence or machine learning, that Insights tab is going to show you, is basically using some machine learning and artificial intelligence right there to pull out what it believes are important things that have changed that you might want to look at. So I don't know exactly how that algorithm works, but basically I think it's looking at baseline data and trying to find discrepancies and things that have changed over time. So on the next line down, we have two channel reports, one that's based on users and the other one that's based on sessions. So a snapshot of our traffic sources, traffic sources is always worth looking at, can lead to pretty interesting insights there. Below that on the next page, this is basically, I'm scrolling down. On the next line, we have some geographic breakdown of our users. Then we have a 30-day, a 7-day, and a 1-day rolling average over time of our website users. Then below that, we have a retention report showing percentage of users who come back and when after their initial visit. We have a report of our most viewed pages within the website, which of course the home page, and not surprisingly, being the most viewed page. We have a reporting of all of these different events that Google Analytics 4 has tracked. And view promotion is the most common event that's more common than a page view, which is pretty interesting if you ask me. Finally, after that, we have, if you scroll down a little bit more, we have these conversions, but be careful because there's multiple types of conversions. Usually when we talk about a conversion, we by default mean the purchase, but there's actually multiple types of conversions, and only one of those three here is actually the purchase conversion that we typically look at. We also have the top selling products, and then we have this conversions by platform report, which is for this website basically uninformative because everything's happening on the website. Okay, that's a pretty whirlwind tour of this GA4 home screen. So remember, I asked you to keep in mind what are those insights, what are the key decisions that we want to get insights into with this from these reports. And so basically on this whirlwind tour, what insights do you get automatically right now that you can use to improve performance of the Google Merchandise Store? And basically, like that question, the answer, I believe, or like what actionable insights do we have about conversion? How can we improve conversion? How can we improve traffic for the store? How can we improve revenue per conversion? Which A/B tests are indicating better versions of a page? What technical problems might we have observed? The answer, basically, we don't get anything from that homepage. So there's really not anything actionable we get right away from that GA4 home screen. And there's two important lessons I want to point out from that fact. Number one is that snapshots in general are not very informative. Most real insights come from having at least 2 data points, yesterday and today. Okay, not literally yesterday and today, but conceptually. What was happening before? What's happening now? All of the data we just saw might be informative to someone who saw this exact same data from September, because they might know if things got better or worse and what actions were implemented at the beginning of October, so they can glean what effect those actions had. The second lesson is that it's easy to believe, very often with data, it's easy to believe you're gaining valuable insights from data when in fact all you're doing is gaining an illusion of informedness. I'm not sure I've heard that phrase before, but that's one I'm going to coin right now. So this illusion of informedness, this belief that you're informed and you're gaining all sorts of insights when all you're actually getting is just data. And data is just data until it is transformed into some kind of actionable insight that converts to a more profitable decision. Okay, so what I want to move on now to is I want to talk about Google Analytics 4, so Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics, and how they relate to one another. So I think the default view is, and like a temptation is to believe, oh, Analytics 4, that's the new one. They've worked on it for a long time and really vetted it. It's newer. So it's basically like Universal Analytics 2.0. It's just bigger and better, right? But the reality is that Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics differ very fundamentally. The unit of analysis of Universal Analytics is the website session. So whenever somebody comes to your website, Universal Analytics says, hey, this is the beginning of your sales opportunity. And so if they leave without buying, that is a squandered opportunity in UA's view. GA4, on the other hand, takes a different view. GA4 basically says, you know what? A visit to your website is one of many possible events in the customer journey. And I want to measure all of the events in that journey rather than giving this preferential treatment to one particular kind of event, which is that session. And that difference in this unit of analysis applies both to the technical setup of the two platforms. They differ in the technical specifications of them. And it also carries through in this underlying philosophy and the reporting that you see on the two platforms. So to illustrate those differences, I want to consider the example of someone who does a search for a mattress. So on the search engine results page, they see this this ad for Casper. It's a a shopping ad, and because they're intrigued by that ad, they end up clicking on that ad, and they end up on this landing page. So once they end up on this landing page, a session has begun. And what happens next? Most likely nothing important, at least in Casper's view. The session ends either on this page or maybe a few page views later, they click in a little bit and then they don't purchase anything. That happens most of the time, the vast majority of the time. Nothing happens from Casper's view. Basically, Casper spent money on this ad, they got nothing in return, and so Universal Analytics is going to say, well, that was a failed session. But GA4 has a different view of that session. GA4 says, hey, we got a new user on the site. They have basically, in a way, opened an account with us. And so now we can track all of the events that this user might do as he or she progresses down the purchase funnel, and we will continue to track that person with the hopes that eventually we'll get a conversion, and we'll be able to see all of the things that led to that conversion. So that different view of that session can lead to differences in your likely actions. So I want to maximize there. So if you're a UA person, you're thinking, dang it, when that person left, I missed that opportunity. I want to keep testing my landing page so I can minimize the number of people who leave without buying anything, or in other words, to maximize my conversion rate. But if you're a GA4 person, you might have a different view of this, and you say, you know what? We've opened this account with this person. They've come to our website. Now they're informed, a little more informed about this, and we know who they are. We're going to see if we can get in front of them again to work them down the purchase funnel. So in neither case, whether you're a UA person or a GA4 person, are you going to ignore the other option? So the UA person is not going to give up on that person. Chances are they're going to run a retargeting ad campaign to make sure they can get in front of that person again and bring them back to the website. And the GA4 person is not going to ignore the possibility of doing conversion rate optimization to maximize the conversion rate. But I think, just because of that different underlying philosophy sort of undergird their analytics, they might end up having a different emphasis on retargeting and other advertising campaigns to get back in front of that person versus conversion rate. And so those differing philosophies can lead to sort of differing divergence in your path and your emphasis on your different marketing efforts. Okay, so right now what I want to do is illustrate how these differing philosophies in tracking between GA4 and UA results in differences on the analytics platform. So what I'm going to do first is compare the home screens of UA and GA4 to start off. So you've already seen the home screen of GA4 that you're looking at now. So it reports users and new users, those top 4 statistics, in those very top left. So that's in keeping with the idea of what we want to do is track our active potential customers. So GA4 is looking at our customers and look at the events that those customers are taking, and we're going to measure how we're progressing through the purchase funnel. It reports engagement time, which can be seen as a reflection of how involved or engaged they are with us, how likely they are to convert. And of course, the finish line, getting purchases from the pool of customers. Now let's compare that with the home screen of UA, which also reports users and revenue, just like GA4, but this also includes sessions, which of course in UA is the fundamental measure of sales opportunities. And critically, in Universal Analytics, it reports the conversion rate, the percentage of the sessions that produced the desired action. But be very careful when you're looking at conversion rate in Universal Analytics. We want to make sure that the conversion is actually just purchases. Sometimes you can set up a bunch of different goals in Universal Analytics that can be considered a conversion. And so that conversion rate sometimes will report other things besides just a purchase, like an email sign up or some other lesser goal. So you might have noticed that UA reported 59,000 users, while GA4, let me go back to that so you can see it, GA4 reported 93,000 users. It's the same period of time. I made both of the analytics looking at the full month of October. So why are those numbers so dramatically different? So there's 2 possible reasons, and I'm not sure which it is or if it's both. And one possible reason is that UA is using stricter filters than GA4 is using. The second possibility is that the data on both platforms is obfuscated. That's my current favorite vocabulary word. That basically just means that Google is purposely altering the data so it's not literally reporting the actual data from the Google Merchandise Store. They're confusing it or obfuscating it a little bit. And my view and my guess is that the actual obfuscation engine they're using to disguise the data is different for GA4 than it is for UA. And that second possibility seems really likely to me when you look at the actual channel breakdown on each home screen. On UA, it's basically saying all of our traffic comes from the direct channel. While in GA4, it gives you a little bit of breakdown that it's not so skewed all towards direct. So I think basically the obfuscation engine is different across those two. Okay, so I gave you a really quick rundown about some foundational differences between UA and GA4. I want to look more specifically at some of those actionable insights, where we find those on the different platforms, and how they differ on UA and GA4. So first, let's talk about conversion. If we're going to be looking at conversion, remember that's our primary mode of increasing our profitability. So how do we improve conversion? If we want to do that on GA4, we want to look at the acquisition overview report. But notice that in GA4, an acquisition isn't a conversion, it's a new user. In GA4's philosophy, once someone has come to our website, we've acquired a potential customer. So the number of users is the primary indication of acquisition on GA4. But nothing here is giving us a good indication of conversion, except for this box that you're seeing in the bottom right, that lifetime value box, which I think is a really awesome report. And it's not one that I've ever actually seen in UA. So what it is showing is the average lifetime value of our users over time from when they first get onto our website. So this plot combines a bunch of different metrics in order to show you that lifetime value curve. So first, it combines the conversion rate and the average order value. You multiply those two together and it gives you the value of a new user on their first day. So that is giving us that lower left-hand point on that chart, that starting point of the lifetime value, how much a new session from a new user is worth right now. And that's based on whether they'll convert and how much money they spend. So every new user who comes to this website is worth a little less than $1 right now, today. And that's basically saying 3% of the time they convert, that was our conversion rate, and they spend around 30 bucks on average. So any new user who comes to the site, they're worth, not knowing whether they're going to convert or not, we know their average value is like 90 cents, right? So, but that's not our whole lifetime value. The lifetime value is how many purchases they're going to make, net present value of all the purchases that they'll make in their lifetime. And we can see that some users come back within a month and spend some more money. So after 30 days, the lifetime value of a new user goes up to almost $2. So let's say maybe another 3% are going to make a purchase sometime later, and they'll spend another 30 bucks within that 30 days. Or maybe it's 1.5% of users make a $60 purchase within 30 days. We don't know that breakdown from this report, but this gives us a really nice indication of how much repeat visit/sales we're getting later on. And notice that, of course, after 100 days, it's basically flattened out to around $2.15. So there's just not a whole lot of repeat purchasing going on much later than within those first 30-day window. Okay, so I'm going to stay within GA4 here, and I want to look at now the traffic acquisition report. So this report breaks down our traffic by channel and shows a variety of metrics about that traffic, including users and sessions. You're not seeing that here because I've scrolled to the right to show you the more pertinent metrics, conversions and revenue. In the last month, most of the conversions for the Google Merchandise Store came from organic traffic, so our organic rankings on the search engine. The second most came from none in parentheses, which means the direct channel. But notice it doesn't report which channel is producing the highest conversion rate. We can calculate it ourselves by dividing conversions by sessions, but by default it's not reported. And again, that's consistent with GA4's philosophy that we don't want to look narrowly at a session. We're trying to look at the entire customer journey. And just because they haven't converted yet doesn't mean they won't convert later. Now, if we jump over to Universal Analytics, the acquisition overview on UA is quite a bit different. Similar to GA4, it breaks down traffic by channel, but notice by default, it reports bounce rate and conversion rate. Again, totally consistent with UA's philosophy. Every session is a sales opportunity, so we want to track what percentage of those opportunities that are capitalized on. So in terms of giving us information about how our website is performing on the conversion domain, UA seems to be giving us better information in my view, because we have in the default view a measure, that key measure of conversion. But, and this is a big but, this data can be highly misleading. Notice that practically all of the traffic is coming from the direct channel. That means these are people who typed in the URL directly into the navigation bar mostly. And we can bet that basically all of those people came to the website previously from some other channel. They visited the website before, took a look around, at the available stuff, and then on a later occasion said to themselves, you know what, I think I do want that Google backpack. So they typed into the URL to the Google merchandise store and then bought a backpack. And even though maybe the paid search channel was what brought them to the website in the first place, it's the direct channel that's getting credit for that purchase. And that is a classic attribution problem that we've known about for decades, but one that GA4 doesn't fall prey to as readily as UA does. And that's because GA4 is better set up to string user sessions together into one whole picture. So that gives you a good sense of that clear trade-off between the two packages. Even though UA gives us a more direct measure of conversion, GA4 does a better job in its attempts to avoid those misleading attribution metrics. Okay, what about bounce rate? Why is bounce rate so prominent in UA when it's hard to even find anything about bounce rate in GA4? And this is yet another great illustration of the difference between these two analytics packages. UA works by basically recording every page view, and then it constructs meaning about those sessions from grouping those page views together. GA4, on the other hand, records events, including things that happen between page loads. So if someone comes to your landing page on the Google Merchandise Store, and they read all the content on that page for like 2 minutes, which is like an eternity, and then they leave the website, UA will record that as a bounce. They only saw one page and then they left the site, so that is a bounce. That's the definition of a bounce. And basically what we're presuming is that they were an unengaged site visitor who wasn't really interested in what we had to sell, and so total failure, failure to even bring in the right traffic. But GA4 will observe that that person scrolled down several times, clearly indicating that they were interested and engaged. And so it will record that much in analytics. And so that is one of the key strengths of GA4, and by turns, one of the key disadvantages of UA. UA's best measure of interest and engagement of a whole group of people is the bounce rate, but GA4 can measure a bunch of different events to provide a more fine-tuned measure of user engagement. And we can see that in GA4's traffic acquisition report. If we go back to that, I believe, yeah, we can see that they use, they have this engagements per the events per session and the engagement rate, which is a little more granular, a little more detailed reporting on what is happening with the users. So back to the UA acquisition report, or acquisition overview report. If we further investigate one of these channels, say paid search, we can get some more detailed information about conversions from individual keywords we're bidding on. This again illustrates the same trade-off between UA and GA4. UA gives you by default some great measures to help you gauge conversions from different keywords, but those can be misleading. You notice that hoodies had 0 conversions, but maybe those hoodies people are more likely to make a return visit. So even though it looks like hoodies are totally cost ineffective, maybe they actually produce more conversions than Google apparel searchers, which had some conversions tracked in here. By the way, an important lesson about attribution: what happens if someone does a search on her mobile phone and goes to the Google Merchandise Store and browses around, but then goes directly to the website from her desktop computer later? Will Google recognize this person as being the same user across both devices? And not too long ago, the answer to that question was definitely not. But now, if she is logged into Google, to her same Google account on both devices, and Google will be able to recognize her as being the same user on both, and so Google will be able to string those two sessions together as coming from the same user. Okay, I want to move on to increasing the purchase amount. Does either UA or GA4 give us reporting that might help us encourage higher transactions among our among our customers? So GA4 has a monetization overview page, which I think is an extremely useful report, particularly when we look at the bottom left of the screen here. It reports the average revenue per user. If you read the analytics chapter of the Digital Marketing Essentials textbook, you'll see in multiple locations where I recommend using revenue per session as a key performance indicator, because knowing that metric will prevent you from overspending for your traffic. If Google is paying $3 per click for their users, they are losing money because each user gives them only $2.71 on average in revenue. And they're losing actually a lot more than that when you think about it, because they might be paying for multiple clicks for the same user. And then once you take into account the cost of the goods sold, they're losing a whole ton of money. The revenue per user is just the average order value times the conversion rate. So this report isn't actually going to be much use for us in helping us figure out how to get our customers to spend more on a transaction. For that, we need to look more in depth at the e-commerce purchases. And here, GA4 shows us the most popular products. Topping the charts is the unisex Eco Tee Black, which strangely has no item views or add to carts. We'd have to look at the Google merchandise store setup and their technical configuration to figure out what's going on, but the cart to view ratio and the purchase to view ratio of this report are extremely illuminating. Almost 20% of users who look at the gray cotton cap eventually put that in their shopping cart. And then very few of them actually end up purchasing it, but then if you look at the charcoal unisex badge tee, that ends up with 7% of users purchasing it. And so that would be a good candidate for a recommended add-on purchase. UA has a similar product performance report, but it certainly doesn't have that same level of reliable detail about shopping behavior. The cart to detail rate is completely unreliable here, as you can see, and so is the buy to detail rate. And so both of those are really messed up, but those could be useful metrics for inferring product popularity and attractiveness to customers. And the reason it's all zeros here or totally messed up here could be because the setup of Universal Analytics wasn't set up quite properly. Or it could just be simply a strength of GA4. I'm not sure which one is going on here, but because it's a demo account, we can't actually look at the technical specifications of the setup. All right, what about analysis of channels? Remember, that's another one we want to look at to see which of our channels is bringing us the best traffic. So in GA4, the direct channel and the organic channel are the best because they're sending us the most users, and that is, which of course brings us the greatest chances for profit. We can also look at the traffic acquisition on GA4 instead of just user acquisition. Which gives us a little bit more of a granular division of our source channels. And for someone like me who's been using Universal Analytics for a long time, my instinct is to look at conversion rate by channel, because that's going to tell me which channel I want to invest more money into to get more profitable traffic. And notice that information is missing from GA4. On UA, I can see that right away, that the direct channel gives us the highest conversion rate. And while the conversion rate on the affiliate channel is higher than on the paid search channel, I can also see that there's not enough data for that to be reliable. And in general, nothing particularly reliable or insightful is coming out of this report because it's crediting the direct channel with pretty much all of the traffic. And this is a little bit frustrating for me because I always want to tie in the data to the decision we're going to make, like where should we invest more money into? And we can't do that here because there's not enough data across multiple channels to let us make a channel comparison. So what I have to do when I'm showing this to my students is basically tell them, well, if we did have better data, here's how we use that data to make our better investment decision. And that's pretty unsatisfactory for me and the students, but that's just kind of the reality of our limitations of the demo account here. So if you look at the links on the very top of this report, you'll notice you can click on the e-commerce link to get a different report that emphasizes different numbers. And I'll show you that here. It's probably hard to see, but now you can see the e-commerce one changed from blue to black, indicating that's the tab we're on right now. And so here we can get the average order value on this report, which is another critical measure for determining which channel is providing us the best traffic. And then we get this really wonderful page per session value metric, which is even better than the conversion rate to measure traffic quality because it's the best single metric to encapsulate the total profitability of a channel's traffic. So if you're teaching Universal Analytics to your students, train them to come to this acquisition channels report and then go to the e-commerce tab. And this is where they're gonna find the most directly actionable intelligence. Okay, moving right along to A/B tests. I'm actually not going to discuss the differences between GA4 and UA in conducting A/B tests because I don't think there really is a difference. If you're using Google's Marketing Cloud, which we're going to, then we're going to conduct our A/B tests using Google Optimize. Google Optimize is tied into analytics on the back end, and we'll use information from analytics to conduct those A/B tests, but we'll do all of the setup of our A/B tests on Google Optimize. So it should work equally well whether you're on GA4 or UA. And this, I think, is really useful. If you haven't done this yet, you should look at Google Optimize and how this works. So when we do Google Optimize, we start with a page we want to conduct an A/B test on, and that is our original page. And then what we do is create a variant. And a variant usually means we just change some aspect of the page that we think might affect the conversion rate or our customer's behavior. So like here, I might say, you know what, I think a more thorough product description on this page is going to make consumers feel better and be more likely to convert. So what Google Optimize allows me to do is adjust this field directly. Instead of going onto my website, creating a new page where I change that, I can actually just use Google Optimize to go onto this page, change that field, and then Google Optimize will automatically change the display of that field. So I can type in my more thorough product description directly on here. Okay, a couple things I want to point out on this setup page of our Google Optimize when I'm setting up my A/B test is that you can create multiple variants if you want. Let's say you want to test one variant where I change the description like I was just talking about, and then I want a second variant, so a third version of the page, where I want to display multiple pictures of the product. Let's say this is the only picture we have, but we have more we can show, and I want to do sort of a scrolling a variety of image I'm showing of the product. Then I can do this, the second variant or that third version of the page. And then what if I want a fourth version? What if I want a fourth version where I change both the description and the picture layout? I can do that by adding a third variant here on my setup page. I don't have it here. I could add variant 3 if I want. Or I can actually run something called a multivariate test instead of an A/B test, or what Google calls an ABN test. So if we run a multivariate test, we can change something from different fields, and then Google Optimize will automatically create all those different combinations of changes together when it runs the multivariate test. Okay, another thing I want to note about here on the setup page are the weights. The original version has a 60% weight, variant 1 has a 7% weight, and then variant 2 has a 33% weight. Okay, first, what does that mean? And second, why would I do that? The weighting just basically means the percentage of users who are going to be randomly assigned to that. So only 7% of people are going to see variant 1, but they're still going to be randomly assigned. We're going to randomly choose 7% of users to see that variant 1. And the reason I might want to do that is, let's say I'm running an A/B test on a landing page that's already performing really well. It's performing really well, but because we're good marketers, we want to see if we can eke out an even higher conversion rate. So we're going to do a test. But we're afraid that this second version might actually perform more poorly than the already high-performing original. In that case, we can just give a 10% weight on the variant. That way, if for some reason that variant is really poorly performing, we're not losing a ton of traffic or losing a ton of conversions. Our profitability only dips a really minor dip in profitability. Only 10% of our traffic is going there. And so then we'll be able to identify that soon, and then we'll be able to cut off that test before we've tanked our profitability for a couple days. We're running out of time, so I'm going to jump really through. I do want to talk really quickly about technical problems. Website analytics are really good for identifying technical glitches on your website. And one particularly common technical glitch comes about when a browser rolls out an update. So let's say Chrome rolls out an update, and when they roll out that update, suddenly, let's say, several of your website's forms aren't working anymore. And the easiest way to see that is by breaking out traffic by browser type. So if Chrome is no longer working properly on our site, we should see the conversion figures of Google, let's say Google Organic on, you see this page on Chrome is going to be a lot lower than Google/Organic on Safari. And the same thing goes on Universal Analytics. So notice that the conversion rate here on Safari is quite a bit lower than it is on Chrome. So it could be there's a technical glitch on Safari. But I would actually wager, because this is the Google merchandise store, I think it's more likely that Mac users are just less inclined to purchase Google branded products relative to Chrome users. Okay, I'm going to skip the next one, which I was just going to show you the conversion funnel really quickly, which actually isn't properly set up. I don't think you can even do conversion rate or conversion funnel analyses on GA4, just because they're a little out of date now, and you can break it down by multiple ways. But what I want to do now is really quickly do a poll. So if Chad, if you can put that poll up here now, or unless I need to do the poll. I'm going to let them take care of that. So what I want to do is a quick poll, and I want to ask you. I tried to be unbiased here and just give you the strengths and weaknesses and the trade-offs of Universal Analytics versus Google Analytics 4. I just want to know, just based on what you believe, what you've seen today, which one do you think is better? And I'm going to let you define better however you want, whether it's better for instructing your students, better for tracking of a website. Which do you consider the better option? Let's give you, let's say 30 more seconds. We've got 17 of you who have answered so far. Okay, so there is you are seeing this. So it looks like about 2/3 of you are saying, I think Google Analytics 4 on net is better, which is perfectly valid. This is not a gotcha poll. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong or right. And I do believe this is personal preference. This is not, there isn't a right answer here. It's simply about which do you think is the better tactic for teaching your students. So I just want to make two last comments before we open it up to questions, just a couple questions because we're basically out of time. One thing is I want to look at the real-time analysis in analytics is really awesome looking, right? It gives you all sorts of really cool stuff and you can see what's happening right now. And this is going to be a lot better on GA4 just because they're better at tracking events. And so because they're tracking things a little more detailed on events that are happening in real time, the GA4 reports on real time stuff is really cool, right? So, but I do want to say that like digital marketers are not like stock traders. We don't need to, sit in front of 20 computer screens looking at all these like changing in stock prices and then finally saying, oh, sell Tesla, put an option on Rivian. That's not how like digital marketing works. And frankly, I think the real-time analysis is mostly just for fun. I don't think there's really much you can do right now by looking at that real-time analysis. And the last thing I want to comment on is attribution. And we've mentioned it already, but basically attribution is my current obsession. If you went to my ProfCon talk a few months back, you can still look at the recording. I love that presentation. I love the project that I was on that I talked about there. I think you should be using field experiments to achieve a reliable measure of your return on ad spend. Analytics can be really misleading, and it's probably for the most part just a little bit misleading or just a little bit off. But my ProfCon talk, I talked about how those analytics can be dramatically misleading. Those metrics that we're looking at can be dramatically off in certain cases, and so. So if you look at like the acquisition channels report, which we've already seen on Universal Analytics, basically, this is a good illustration of how analytics can be a little bit off. So we know that the direct channel is our best channel, but we know that most of those people came to the Google Merchandise Store from everything else. So if we know that this is the best channel, should we try to get more people to type the URL in directly? That's kind of a silly inference, and students recognize that that's not the action, that's not the lever we want to pull to improve profitability, to get people to not do a search anymore and come directly to the website. It doesn't even make sense to try to move it in that sense. So this data is telling a story, but we have to actually like understand the underlying process to tell the accurate story. And so I would actually say, if you look at the materials that are available in digital marketing analytics, Chapter 3, Teaching Analytics, I actually recommend Teaching Analytics with a base of Universal Analytics because it gives a more direct if-then relationship. If you see this data, then do this to be more profitable, and then you can use GA4 to enrich that story. So that's one particular teaching tactic. That's the one that I propose or that I use in the textbook. But again, no right or wrong answer. GA4, Universal Analytics, whichever one is better for you, of course, use that to teach your students. And then finally, just as I sign off, of course, if you should all have access to Digital Marketing Essentials. Chapter 3 is where I teach analytics. There's also the Digital Marketing Essentials videos. I re-recorded all of those over the last several months, and from January to April, I was re-recording all of those videos. And a lot of those videos, even if you're not going to assign them to your students, that might give you some useful additional supplemental information about both analytics and anything else in digital marketing. You can just check those videos out to get some supplemental information. And then, of course, that attribution through experimentation case, which is what I presented on at ProfCon, I think is a pretty cool case. Of course, I'm biased, but check that out. That's it. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped on a little prematurely, but awesome presentation. Yeah, that was super interesting, and we're lucky to have you on our team, Jeff. So there are a few questions here. If I could just ask you those real quick. So Barbara is wondering, with the change in cookies and tracking, she's wondering, can you track the individual even with the change in tracking customers? And she also asked, isn't retargeting going away?
Yeah, so here's I have to admit, like I'm still I'm taking a back seat on that whole thing. I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen with retargeting, but here's the deal: is like we can still track users using cookies because your analytics data is first-party cookies, not third-party cookies. Third-party cookies are the issue. It's sharing what's like, and that's from GDPR with the Europeans saying, hey, you can't share personally identifiable information from one website to another. But your own cookie is that's your customer. You're not sharing that information by tracking your people on your own website with analytics. And so there's no problem that analytics is going to have with tracking your users. The problem is doing retargeting, because that is using a third-party cookie on a Google ad network. And so I'm not sure that there's some proposed fixes. And if you saw my ProfCon talk, you'll notice that I'm a pretty a big naysayer on the actual value. I think the value of retargeting is it's extremely inflated. The reporting that you get from analytics that like your retargeting is the most profitable channel, it's extremely inflated. And if you look at the ProfCon talk or check out that case, you'll see why I think that, and the evidence that I have for that. And so frankly, I'm not sure it's such a big deal if retargeting goes away. And a third thing to consider about retargeting is the fact that I think some of those technical fixes that Google has proposed using these like micro segmentation, I think that's going to be really easy to replicate retargeting using those techniques. Just because if somebody's been to a website, you can't share the cookie, but there's ways you can segment customers that makes it really obvious this is the kind of customer who has been to the website and done this recently. I think they might not call it retargeting anymore, but basically you'll be able to set up a campaign that works almost exactly the same and still track. That's my prognostication. I'm not 100% sure that's going to work, and I'm taking a bit of a back seat and just kind of see how that plays out first.
Gotcha. Well, that was perfect, because it leads kind of into this next question from Minder. They ask, are we using cookie or the unique IP address to track and analyze the user clickstream data from the web server log file?
Yeah, so if you look at Google has a lot of really good stuff. They have three different levels of ways how they can track people. And if you're a website where people log in, they're going to use that to track people because that's the most reliable indication of somebody across multiple devices. There's the huge advantage of tracking people across multiple devices if they're coming to your website and logging in. Short of that, Google will say, well, we'll actually use their Google login. If they are logged into Google, which a large portion of people are logged into Google whenever they're browsing around, Google will say, we'll just use their Google login as their identifier if you don't have a website login. And then third, after that, they'll use the cookie. So they don't use, which is of course the first party cookie. They're not going to use IP address just because IP addresses, cookies have problems too, but IP addresses have more problems. The IP address spoofing is being one thing, but then like from my university, my computer, my IP address is constantly changing, and I might have the same IP address as somebody else. So IP addresses are not typically used at all in analytics, to my understanding.
Gotcha. Good to know. All right, Jeff. That is all the questions we had for you today. We appreciate you being on here and sharing your thoughts and everything. And yeah, if you have any last minute things to say, let us know, and we appreciate it.
Okay, thanks everybody.